Welcome everybody to the War and Peace Fantasy Baseball Podcast. I'm here today with Ray Estrada and Alex Rudy. I'm Alex Hui. How are you guys doing today?
I'm doing good.
First day of June, it's just about summer. You guys getting ready for the heat?
Oh, I've already gone way too much. I got my sunburn in South Beach was killer. So
I like it.
I'm ready to go back to the Michigan winter already.
Already? I never heard anybody say they've missed winter so badly, because summer is when baseball happens, right? That's the best time of the year, and it's June now. We got plenty of time to talk about all these players and teams that we're worried about. We got a nice slate of games coming up this weekend, so we'll give you all the news on that, and we'll go ahead and start by talking about a few pitchers that are fresh off the DL, and those would be Corey Kluber, James Paxton, and Happ. All coming off of their own, really, I can consider minor injuries. I don't have real injury concerns with them going forward, but let's go ahead and talk about Kluber a little bit, who is definitely the premier name of this bunch. Do you guys have any concerns about Kluber? He's really sharp off the DL, but against the A's, you kind of have to take that with a grain of salt. But this is a top pitcher. Do you guys have anything to say about Kluber?
Yeah, I mean, I would say so far this year, Kluber's been his usual guy where he never starts off super hot anyways. But, the strikeout stuff has been there, and all the peripherals except his ERA have still been, rather effective anyways. So as long as you're in a situation where you can kind of get away with his relatively high ERA for an ace, and that doesn't really bother you, then, I see no reason to not expect him to be a top fantasy pitching option this year. Once again, was his injury an arm? What was his injury?
That would be
a back injury.
Yeah.
It was a back injury, back tightness.
So there's no, backs are, generally aren't injuries that, go away super quickly and can be nagging, but, backs don't necessarily affect pitchers any more than any other position, so I just see no reason not to expect him to be, his usual effective self this year. He's not like he was declining earlier.
I agree with that. I have an interesting question, though, is would you rather have Kluber or Paxton going forward? Because, we've seen what Paxton did in his first month, and his first outing back, he was on a very tight pitch count, but what he did in his short amount of time was every indication that he's going to be really, really good still. He shut down the Rockies for, I think, just over 5 innings, and that's a good offense right there. His arm looked good, the smooth delivery stuff looked exactly the same, and this guy, I think we were really talking about as one of the new aces to really burst onto the scene early in the season. What do you think about Paxton going forward? His value is probably as high as it will ever be, but he could definitely. I could see a scenario where he sustains this for a long period of time.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think he's going to sustain a 1.25 ERA for too much longer, but I would still take Kluber over him just because Kluber's been doing this for like 3 or 4 years now and isn't significantly older and doesn't have the history of arm issues that Paxton does. But at the same time, it's undeniable that Paxton has been arguably the best pitcher in baseball so far this year and has been unbelievably electrifying. And, if you can still buy low off someone who doesn't really believe in him, I would definitely recommend doing so.
Yeah, I would prefer Kluber over Paxton going forward just because we've seen Kluber. We know how consistent he can be. I mean, he's won the Cy Young, but Paxton, if he does keep this up, he could be a very attractive option for years to come.
Yeah, and I think I recently traded Paxton in one of my leagues, and this was while he was on the DL. I see his first start back, and I just think to myself, this guy is really special. I hadn't seen him in a while, but in terms of just pure ability, the fastball is so effortless in the high 90s. Really good slider. Like, the command is something that really has come around for him. I think it's very comparable to the way Jake Arrieta learned how to, pitch down in the zone and throw a lot more strikes and be effective. But it's hard to go against a guy like Kluber with such a track record that he has. But I do think James Paxton, for me personally, is going to be a top 10 pitcher going forward. And it's a little bit reactionary, but I think it's definitely warranted at this point. Let's talk about Happ, who's in a little bit of a different tier, I would say, and one of the more effective pitchers, at least last year, and so far this season. Doesn't look like he's regressing too much. He is still going to strike out plenty of batters. He's still going to go deep enough into games and get a lot of wins. So where do you kind of rank Happ in this sort of pitcher environment?
He's like it's just nothing I really rave about. I mean, he really's only had one great fantasy season his entire career. I would if he's on your team, he's kind of off the DL. I wouldn't just kind of drop him, and decide I can't afford him on my roster or anything. It's not like he's that in that realm, but I think he can be a solid option for the rest of the season. I have in one of my leagues, but I mean, he's not going to carry your team. He's just kind of in my opinion, a workhorse innings leader type. Even though he was so effective last year, who can get you, consistent outings in major categories. But I'm not. He doesn't really excite me too much, personally.
Yeah, Happ, he's kind of a middle of the road kind of guy. Down a little bit this year, but I mean, last year he was a huge steal, and I was on board for that ride, which I'm happy with, or for most of it, anyways. But yeah, not all that much to write home about. But he's not a must own, but he's not a must drop either.
Yeah, I think he's hovering around that 30 mark in terms of starting pitchers anyway, in terms of ranking. I do like what he's doing. I like the consistency. He's not a guy that's going to throw you a sub-1 whip at any point, but he's been incredibly consistent since that second half of the 2015 season where he went to Pittsburgh and kind of reworked his whole game. And, he's striking out plenty of batters. He's going to get plenty of wins. And I know that doesn't really indicate much, but it is important. He is that kind of pitcher who will be productive despite, some less than ideal numbers. Right, like in a very small sample, he's got a 4.5 ERA. I can see that finishing, maybe even a run lower if all goes right for him this season. I don't think last year was as fluky as a lot of people think. So yeah, that's about it on the pitcher front. Let's talk about a couple of position players that left the game for the same team, actually, the Mariners. Nelson Cruz and Jean Segura both leaving the game. The Mariners cannot catch a break. What are the Mariners going to do now with, Segura back on the DL? They already missed him for a long time, and now one of their best hitters, Nelson Cruz, potentially going to miss some time here. Let's start
They're fucked.
We should probably start with one position at a time here. Let's look at their outfield situation, because they're a team that has a lot of interesting mixing and matching options here going forward. So I guess I should explain also that Mitch Haniger,
isn't he still on the DL too?
He is going to be going on rehab assignment next week, though. So they're not going to have to bridge the gap too long. We don't even know if they're going to have to bridge the gap that long for Cruz. Again, he just left his game today I'm looking up what exactly it was, if they have any notes on that. But I think the point is, Seattle outfield going into the season looked really promising, and right now doesn't look nearly as promising as it did. I think that's the main point. I'm sure you guys don't have much knowledge about the depth of the Seattle Mariners outfield off the top of your head anyway, so I'm not gonna to ask you too much about
Honestly, that. Looking at it right now, it's not anything that is gonna contribute in fantasy at all. Unless Ben Gamel and Gerard Dyson turn into suddenly consistent contributors out of nowhere. I mean, I don't really think these moves are going to be too impactful unless you're a really big Danny Valencia guy, maybe. And he's going to get, some extra DH opportunities with Cruz on the DL, but nothing that seems too exciting. I mean, on one thing I do notice about the Mariners is that they, according to r/baseball, they have by far the most self-deprecating fan base I've ever seen in any sports medium, and that's coming from a New York Knicks fan. And let me tell you, we take self-deprecating as like our national pastime. So I've never seen a group of individuals who just embrace like their nihilism about how depressing their sports fandom is than those guys. And they're just numb to this pain at this point. I don't even think they even bat an eye at these injuries. They probably just expect it, if anything.
Yeah, well, Cruz left the game with calf tightness, and there's not a real clear understanding of what that means. That could possibly be a DL stint, but I don't think they've done anything to act upon that yet. And I can't see what Segura's injury was at the moment, but I think the point is that the Mariners are not where they want to be, and you're going to be able to see some guys. You mentioned Ben Gamel, for one, who looked really good right when he came up and started getting some playing time, but now is not very exciting. You'll see a lot of these types of players fill in. I don't think there's any diamond in the rough here for fantasy purposes anyway. You should still be using Dyson. You should still, I don't know, like the rest of their team is very obvious. You should still be using Kyle Seager. That's another guy that I should mention who is not off to a great start, but definitely has warranted some trust at this point. So yeah, I think that's enough about the Mariners. As you mentioned, their fans are definitely used to this kind of stuff. They'll manage, and fantasy owners will definitely manage. So I think I think that's just about it in terms of the news in terms of players recently. I think this is Sam Dyson was recently designated for assignment. I don't think that had much relevance anymore, but I think it basically sealed the deal that said, yeah, this guy is literally the worst relief pitcher in baseball right now.
Can I ask a question about that?
Yeah.
Like, his release? When I got my ESPN alert, it said designated for assignment, Rangers are looking to trade him. So can you still trade a guy who you've designated to assignment for assignment? I thought
because you're not. You didn't release
it's not the same thing as releasing a player. I've always kind of wondered that.
What designated for assignment is essentially like it's kind of a pseudo waiver thing where you put a guy out there. Somebody can either trade for him. You could release him, or after a certain time, he goes to the minor leagues. You can designate him for assignment to the minor leagues.
Yeah. So.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
I don't think there's any relevance.
Honestly, I just think
Dyson anyway, so I wouldn't be looking for him.
I just think the bullpen coach at Texas, whoever his name is, must be the worst in the league by far, because every single guy who goes there ends up doing terrible for as long back as I can remember. As long as the Rangers have really been relevant in recent history, it just seems like every reliever they get, their career blows up in their face.
Yeah, and these are some really, high potential arms. Matt Bush and I think it's How do you pronounce this guy? Keon Kella? Is that?
Dude, that guy's slider is nasty.
Keona Kella. Yeah, those guys are definitely. Yeah. Every bit as good stuff-wise as other relief pitchers around the league. So I don't think there's a lot of risk when you have pitchers throwing, 99 with dirty sliders. So those are definitely your options there. Sam Dyson was not that mold, apparently. And, I hope the guy pitches again. He was a really good pitcher last year. Just this year, I don't think there's any more to look for there. Let's talk about a few players. And
Rest in peace, the Solly Feliz.
Is he still around? Did he get DFA'd by
I think
the Brewers, or is he still out there?
I'm pretty sure he's been released, but
he was on the Brewers last I knew. I think so. Is that still the first place Brewers? By the way,
so hyped.
Is that still the first place Brewers that we should be calling them over there?
I believe so.
Yeah,
I'm pretty sure.
With Eric Sogard and Hernan Perez leading the way over there, the big names. They're doing this without Ryan Braun, which is really funny.
Says currently a 5.09 ERA, but
yeah, he's still pitching.
8 saves, so
well,
he's balancing it out.
It is only about half of what Sam Dyson's was. So.
He has resolve.
That's true.
I saw Sam Dyson give up like 4 runs in 1 inning the other night, and his ERA actually went down. So that's
you got to start somewhere, I guess.
Pretty impressive.
Yeah, I mean every little bit to bring it down. I don't think his team appreciates that. Let's talk about a couple players for our Here to Stay or Keep Away segment, which we do on this show every now and then. And I've only got a couple players for you here, but one hitter and one pitcher here. Elvis Andrus. I never pronounce it right. It's really
Andrus.
Elvis Andrus is not hitting like himself right now. He's hitting for power, and that's about all you have to say about him. This is a very different player, and there's definitely fantasy value here now, even more so than before. It's more than just batting average and steals now, and I'm really having trouble figuring out where to rank him among other shortstops, which is, believe it or not, one of the stronger positions in the game now. Is there anything you like in particular about Elvis Andrus, or do you think this is a fluke and you should keep away from him?
I don't think it's actually...
I'm all in on
it, Ray.
Yeah, I'm all in on Elvis Andrus. I mean, he batted .302, a career high last year. He was batting .297 so far this year with an .811 OPS. And he's got still 12 steals so far, still 24. And like I said, his power's gone up. I mean, not double-digit home runs, but he's got 7 so far this year, which is 1 below his career high last year. But I mean, he was very impressive last year, and he's proven it this year that at least last year, for now, it's not much of a fluke.
Yeah, I read an interesting theory that people thought Ron Washington was holding him back, maybe, and was trying to make him into this, super kind of, small ball type shortstop like Washington played, kind of mold him into what he was. And I think that might have held him back. And he's always been a very talented guy. People forget as a young player how well-touted he was. So I think I don't know if it's this sustainable, but I don't know if it's just a complete, something to disregard at the same time.
Yeah, and I think there is clear evidence that he's trying to do something different, just based on, the StatCast data anyway. I don't know how involved certain players are with this, on a personal level, but when you see differences, I tend to believe that they're making an effort to change. And yeah, I think it's really hard at this point in the game to acknowledge or to even try to be successful with the small ball style of play. That's just not cutting it anymore, and people are finally figuring that out. I like Andrus. I keep saying it wrong, and I don't think you should. If you own him, don't cut him. If you can sell him, I would sell him, because I'm just not that intrigued. And shortstop's a really deep position. When a guy like Zach Cozart is just leading all of shortstops in basically every offensive category, he is. There's a lot of weird stuff going on with shortstops this year, and I think you could definitely be on the lookout for another option. I'm acting like I don't really like Andrus very much. He's just not a very exciting player to me. Does steal a lot of bases, so that's good, I guess. Yeah, I didn't mean to downplay that. You seem very excited about what Andrus is doing, and I was kind of like, I don't think quite as highly of him. Yeah, let's talk about the other player here for our segment, and that would be Jose Quintana. What to do with a guy who just refuses to get outs and is giving everybody every opportunity to hit home runs off of him when he was really good at keeping the ball in the park last year, it seemed like. What are your obviously your initial reactions to Quintana are, Jesus, like what do I do with this guy? But what are your thoughts on him going forward? I guess I would say.
I think he's a fairly confusing pitcher, to be quite honest. He's had an up and down career, and him and HOU TEX have always been two guys who come to mind in terms of just they never really match the consistency that you would wish that they would bring with the stuff and ability that they clearly have. But I will just say his home run to fly ball rate is well above his career average. His FIP is almost a run and a half below, actually over a run and a half below his ERA. His strikeouts are actually up. His walks are down, and his walks are actually slightly up, but his strikeouts are way up, and his home run rate is way above his career average, but that's also been steadily increasing for the past 2 years. And what's really interesting is that he greatly decreased his home run rate back in 2014 from 1 home run per 9 to just less than half, and now he's all the way back up to 1.4. So clearly they've been making mechanical or pitch selection changes that have been slowly bringing that back up. And what all this, advanced metrics mumbo jumbo seems to say is that, like I said, just a guy that really lacks consistency and, refuses to, kind of just pitch with any coherent, stretch of ability. And
I don't think he's choosing. I don't think he's choosing to be bad. But.
I'm sorry if it came off that way, but
no,
I know. Just in the sense that he's not a pitcher who brings the same stuff to every game. That's what I was trying to say. Sorry. And in terms of just fantasy, I would just say, and also his fly ball percentage is by far the highest of his career. So, and his home run to fly ball percentage as well is really high, all career highs. So, like you said, clearly the home runs are way up, but I would still consider buying low on him because the talent's still there. He's only 28 years old, and it's not like the stuff looks like it's going away. He's still striking out a ton of batters. He is probably going to be a high home run guy looking forward, at least this season, but he clearly has the ability to adjust back the opposite direction. And if you're in a league where home runs specifically aren't a big minus during the scoring, I would really recommend trading low for him, because I'm sure there's plenty of guys who are willing to give him up for really any value when he's been this disappointing this year. And I believe in him. I mean, there's no reason for me to expect, at least in my opinion, that he doesn't bounce back to at least being maybe not his peak, but still a fantasy asset.
Yeah, and I think the thing with Quintana, it definitely seems to just really be a command issue. And I'm going to be clear, he's not having a problem with control. He's not having problems throwing strikes. Clearly, everything he's throwing is getting mashed.
I think it's the opposite.
Throwing a lot of strikes.
I think he's throwing,
that's what I'm saying. It's just the command in the zone is something that really brought him to that next level, and it's kind of taken a step back. I really don't want to throw the World Baseball Classic argument out there in terms of not getting a proper spring training and everything, but he was throwing a lot of really high stress innings in that WBC for Columbia, and really high quality innings, probably on a much earlier cycle than he's used to, I'm sure, in spring training. And I can't make that excuse for everybody, especially because it's June now, but if there's anything throwing off his rhythm and just not allowing him to really find that groove that he got in, where he knew where the ball was going every single time he left his hand, My mind goes to that initially.
My mind kind of goes to the fact that he's the ace in Chicago now. Chris Sale's out of there. He's the number one guy. I'm wondering how much that has an effect on him. And, I mean, if it's any extra pressure on him, but I'm wondering if that's more the thing. But, I mean, looking at him, his numbers aren't spectacular when you look at his year-to-year stats. I know you don't like wins, Uwe, but his only double-digit win season was last year, and that was still 13-12. His career low ERA was last year. It's 3.2. He's a big innings eater, strikes out a lot of guys, but, I mean, nothing too spectacular in terms of, like, the normal counting numbers you see with pitchers, but a very solid fantasy option. And I would say he is a buy low guy.
Yeah, I think I value him still in my top 25 at the very least. That's just personally how I feel about him. And I think, what happened. The control is command anyway. Does not have to stay as bad as it was. We've seen what he can do in the past. So not too much concern there. Let's take a quick look at our weekend schedule here. A few really what should be entertaining matchups here. One of those being the Cardinals at Wrigley to face the Cubs. That's always a great one. And this is a really struggling Cubs everything. Lineup, pitching hasn't been fantastic. And St. Louis has also kind of scuffled after going on a little bit of a run. They can't seem to get in a groove either. These are not the two teams that are commanding that division like they should be. What are your thoughts on either of these teams individually? Do you think this this very intense series will kind of spark something in one of, or if not both of these teams? Because I feel like that does happen when you play a big series. These are what start hot streaks and what kill hot streaks in my mind.
I think.
Yeah, but I mean, I'll let you go, Rudy.
Oh no, go ahead.
Okay. Well, the show that Rudy and I did a few weeks ago, this was one of our previews. It was Cubs at Cardinals, and we talked about the same thing. Could this get either of them going? And I mean, it hasn't all that much. I mean, the Cubs are sliding. The Cardinals just fought back to take 2 out of 4 from the Dodgers at home. But I mean, these teams haven't been all that consistent, at least all year. And maybe this time around it gets them going. But I mean, last time we thought it would, but it hasn't so far.
I think if one of these teams is going to get a spark from this series, it has to be the Cubs. Just because they have so much talent on their roster and so many guys who've been underperforming and disappointing, they're much more likely to suddenly improve. Though their rotation is a bit worrying at this point. I would just say their offense has so many bats. I'm pretty confident they'll get in form. But the Cardinals, I just don't really think are that good, to be honest, this year, because their rotation's been the best in the National League so far, and they still haven't been too great. And I just don't think they have enough consistent offensive talent this season to really be much more than they are. I mean, people need to really realize the Cardinals have been arguably the best team in baseball for the past 15 seasons. I think you could make the case that I think the Red Sox are obviously up there too. So they might just be kind of at the end of that era. Their lineup doesn't really scare me. Very few of those guys are guys who I think really strike fear in the opposition, and they've had a lot of injuries. I think they just sent down one of their top out. I think
Randall Grichuk.
Randall Grichuk just got sent down to Single A. He was supposed to be one of the biggest contributors this year, and
I can explain the Single A really quick though.
It's because I think I saw because Triple A and Double A they have a bunch of top outfield prospects who are all performing well, so they just couldn't spare the time, and also they wanted to just give them a low pressure mechanical adjustment period in Single A, which makes sense. But I mean, is that why? You can correct me.
I didn't hear that, but like Single A, it's still extended spring training, and so he'll go down there, get extra at bats in like the backfields at their facilities, and then be able to play in games.
Regardless, I mean, past Fowler and Carpenter, none of these bats, in my opinion, are really top guys, and those two guys can't really carry an offense. They're more complementary, pure hitters at most. So, I mean, I think that bullpen is solid. I think the rotation is outstanding, especially now that Wainwright's kind of pitching a little bit better, and Walker and Lynn and Lee have all had great bounce back years after either injury plagued or disappointing 2016. But if the offense isn't going to be better, I think they only have such high of a ceiling that they could reach.
Yeah, and just from a fantasy angle, really quick, I just want to point out a few players that I like in this series, or that I'm really looking at their performance anyway. I think Matt Carpenter's a really good buy low. You mentioned him. I think Dexter Fowler's going to have himself a nice series. I don't know much about him going forward, but I think being back in Wrigley will, give him a little bit of a bump there. I'd like to use his bat while he's back in Wrigley. And, even, Jason Hayward for the Cubs, who really hasn't been as bad as he was last year, and I think is going to be an important guy for the Cubs in this series. Some of those struggling bats is really hard to say. Really, like young guys, Schwarber, Happ for the Cubs just can't seem to get it going. But there's plenty of veteran bats in there. Zobrist and Rizzo's gotten it going. Chris Bryant's the MVP for crying out loud. Like these guys are gonna hit, and it might be this weekend. It might not. But just for this weekend, I threw a few names out there that I like. The pitching matchups at Wrigley are always very, very up and down. It's hard for me to recommend any pitchers in particular there. Let's talk about a couple more series here before we end off. We'll talk about the Red Sox going into Baltimore. I think they start off that series today, actually, 4-game set, and Baltimore won the first one of this series, but Mookie Betts always does it in Baltimore, it seems. Other than Mookie Betts, who just destroys at that ballpark, who else are you looking at in this series? Don't all speak at once now.
Yeah, I think because we interrupted each other back to back, we were
it's the waiting game.
A chance to.
I actually had nothing to say.
I should start addressing you guys directly. That's a good idea.
This is definitely going to be a high octane offensive series. I'd be very careful with any starting pitching matchups because Camden Yards is a great hitter's park. Unless I'm mistaken, I'm pretty sure though.
No, you're definitely not mistaken.
And then,
yeah,
these are two lineups filled with great bats. Both teams have been playing not outstanding lately, but still well. And I'm not really sure how exactly the Red Sox offense has been scoring, but the Orioles scored a fairly decent number of runs against the Yankees. They destroyed Tanaka. So I would say batters-wise, this should be a very high-scoring series. But I would be very careful with your pitchers on if you have any this weekend on the Orioles or Red Sox.
Oh yeah, I would even go as far to sit them. I think there's some big bats that are just bound to wake up in this series, and that already may have done so in today's game. Trumbo would be one of them. Led the majors in home runs last year, and now only has 8 on the season, but I think he can just go on a tear at any point now. Chris Davis, obviously, the raw power. Adam Jones, at any point in time, can go on a tear. Manny Machado, maybe, who has been really, really disappointing, but, he's Manny Machado, so nobody's really worried about him. He's got to do something in this series, or else I would be very, very worried about him. I think it's one thing to struggle. It's one thing to not, kind of step up and do something about it, because it's gone on for a very long time. When you're a superstar, you can have cold spells, but you can't have, just complete droughts like this. It's something else what Machado's doing right now. On the Red Sox side, Bogarts and Jackie Bradley Jr., those are probably the two that I'm looking at the most there. Anything else on that series before we'll talk about one more here. Let's talk about the Texas matchup. Houston goes in to play the Rangers, and Houston has scored, 500 runs this past week against the Twins. Like, Jesus Christ, their offense is just firing on all cylinders right now. I just can't imagine any scenario where Texas comes out with some wins in the series just the way Houston's been hitting. Do you guys, what specifically do you guys think you should be looking for in the series?
I would say George Springer continuing to be really hot. I mean, Houston's been the best team in baseball so far this year. And, we talked about the bullpen rows in Texas, and it's not like their rotation is anything spectacular past Darvish especially. So I would once again be counting on Houston to deliver offensively.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if Houston came in with a sweep. I mean, it's just matchups. You would think going to okay, maybe this could be this is where the Rangers could maybe stop the Astros momentum and kind of turn into a two-dog fight in the West. But I mean, Darvish does go tomorrow, but he's up against Keuchel. And then you have Cashner and Perez going Saturday and Sunday for the Rangers. And with this Astros offense, I just don't see the Rangers stealing one. They might steal tomorrow's game if they can get to Keuchel, but I just don't see him winning this weekend.
Yeah, I think
I will say.
Sorry, I was just gonna say the only the only scenario where they pull a game out in my mind is with Darvish on the mound against what is still a very strikeout-prone Astros lineup, and that's his game. He misses bats for the most part. He might give up one or two homers in that game, but still will probably strike out 10 batters through 5 or 6 innings. That's just normally how he's been, and that might be enough depending on how good Keuchel is. I'm sorry, what were you going to say?
I would just say, not that I like him for this series at all, but Cashner has had a surprisingly effective bounce back this year, and has been pretty dependable in fantasy so far. But I would not recommend relying on him in this series. 2-4.
Yeah, and I think
his peripherals have been pretty good, but you're right, his record's nothing to be proud of.
I think he's going to AJ Griffin pretty soon.
Yeah, he probably will regress significantly.
Yeah. And Tyson Ross is coming back. He's making rehab starts. Any interest in Tyson Ross going forward? I think that's an intriguing guy to keep your eye on.
I think he's interesting, but he would have to really prove himself before being really viable in fantasy. I mean, it's not like he was ever incredible. He was good, but nothing to really. That he wasn't.
I don't know. He was racking up a lot of strikeouts, which is really valuable.
That was 2.5 years ago already. I mean, that's.
Yeah. I think you really just have to look at the life on that arm more than anything to see what's going on. But yeah, I think there's still something there. Hopefully, I really would be disappointed if all we got to see from Tyson Ross is what we saw with the Padres. So yeah, I think that's a good place to wrap up the podcast for today. I'd like to remind everybody that we'd absolutely love your feedback and also questions, your fantasy baseball questions. We'll answer them all if you have any on this podcast. You can ask us by tweeting us at WPB_podcast on Twitter, or you can email us at warandpeacebaseball@gmail.com, or you could go to our Facebook page and leave comments there. Really, you could leave your questions anywhere, and we'll find them and we'll answer them. And and I'd like to remind you that this podcast is on iTunes and YouTube. So that's about it. As always, Rudy.